President Trump is in Scotland. We are going to look at RussiaGate 101. Ron Klain, former Biden White House Chief of Staff, is on the Hill testifying. We're going to talk about the missing $100 million in California and a few new revelations. All that and more today on a special On the Road 10-minute drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
Ever since President Trump first ran for office back in 2016, a narrative that has surrounded him was the role of Russia in the 2016 election and beyond. He calls it RussiaGate. New revelations last week after Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard released and declassified a 44-page House Intelligence Committee report alleging that Obama administration officials intentionally manufactured or politicized intelligence claiming Russia favored President Trump.
Obama's been caught directly. So people say, oh, you know, a group. It's not a group. It's Obama. His orders are on the paper.
There is now significant reason to doubt a lot of the conclusions that were presented back in 2016, 2017, and 2018. As a Senate staffer in 2016 through 2018, remembering how much Democrats jumped all over this, they wanted to seed the narrative that Russia had handpicked President Trump because they believed they could manipulate him. There was so much discussion about compromat, so much from the Steele dossier and other shady sources that ended up being really unreliable. So what Tulsi Gabbard has revealed here is new doubts about what Russia's intentions were from the very beginning. And what's important here, President Obama responded to this because Tulsi Gabbard referred President Obama, John Brennan, James Clapper, and James Comey to the Department of Justice and FBI for potential criminal charges. President Obama is defending himself. He's saying none of this material contradicts the bipartisan finding that Russia interfered in the 2016 election but did not alter votes.
At no time did we ever conclude that the Russians succeeded in entering voting machines and changing the vote tally.
There's a moving goalpost dynamic here, where in 2016, if you were to turn on Rachel Maddow or even listen to any House or Senate Democrat involved in this investigation, which President Trump calls a witch hunt, you would believe that Russia had hacked into voting machines, changed the results of elections, and had this massive manipulation operation. The goalposts have moved to where what interfere actually means is still very much being debated. But the most important part of this overall is the fact that now we have significant doubt about what Russia's motivations were. New intelligence that not new, but new to us because this is just getting unveiled, suggests that Russia might have wanted actually a weakened Hillary Clinton to win, not President Trump at all. Now, you may say that those are distinctions without differences, but I think what really matters here is over the last 10 years, while this issue's dogged President Trump, defined his first term, now we don't even know what their actual motivation was, even though President Obama at the time, Hillary Clinton, and everybody else wanted people to believe that Russia was breaking through machines to get Donald Trump elected. So I think he's right to feel the Russia frustration that he feels about this, and we'll continue to find out new details as they come out. One of the secondary issues that has followed this immigration debate is the role that immigrants play in the census and the role that the census then plays in setting congressional maps to determine how many representatives come from each state and what areas they represent. A lot of people believe that Democrats have wanted to bring in more and more illegal immigrants in states where they count in the census because it would allow blue states to inflate their population numbers and then have more congressional representation and more Democrats in Congress, particularly after the last few years where you've seen states like California lose people to red states like Texas, Florida, things like that. Texas and Florida in particular right now are talking about redistricting and redrawing their congressional map lines because they believe that their current congressional representation, the breakdown, is not as representative of their state as it should be. That has led Democrats to new levels of outrage, saying they're going to go back and redo all of their maps. But one problem that the New York Times highlighted: Democrats have very few opportunities to gerrymander because they've already gerrymandered so much. They have gotten as much as they can out of some of these blue states like California, Illinois, New York, and others that are incredibly unfair. And so it's fascinating to see the New York Times and Democrats opine that Democrats don't have better options when the reason they don't have options is because they already did so much gerrymandering. Prime Minister returns. You may remember that President Biden's first Chief of Staff, Ron Klain, was often referred to behind the scenes as the Prime Minister because in so many meetings, he acted as the president. He was the one who was meeting with, the radical Democrats on Capitol Hill to make deals while President Biden was well behind the scenes. There were even reports that he countermanded a lot of what President Biden said in meetings. Well, last week, he was on Capitol Hill to testify to the House investigation into President Biden's use of the autopen and the cover-up over the failings of his presidency. Klain reportedly told House investigators that Jake Sullivan and Hillary Clinton had conveyed to Klain that Biden was not politically viable, which is a bombshell when you look back at what Jake Sullivan was saying at the time. July 19th, at the Aspen Security Forum, Jake Sullivan said, "I believe the President of the United States is doing a very good job as president and will continue doing a very good job, and that's why he's standing for office." However, that was July 19th, 2024. What happened on July 21st, 2024, 2 days later? Joe Biden announced he was dropping out. So while Jake Sullivan was telling Ron Klain and others that he was no longer politically viable, he was telling the masses that Joe Biden was perfectly capable of doing his job. This is the reason this is only going to get worse and worse and worse. But let's fast forward. Here's Jake Sullivan back in April on TV talking about President Trump.
These are the things that are distinctively American. And in less than 100 days, President Trump has gone after all of them. I don't believe anything is ever irrevocable because I believe in the capacity of the American people to reinvent and regenerate. But the damage he has done so far is significant, and it appears that there's probably more to come.
So again, the guy who was involved in the Biden cover-up until the very, very last day is not going to be a very good messenger to talk about President Trump and how the world views, the strength of the American presidency. We got a lot of reaction to our story last week diving into the missing $100 million California wildfire relief, which was again designated for direct relief, but has now been laundered through a wide range of political nonprofits in California, and victims are saying they haven't seen a dime of it. So let's read some of those comments. Kayla Jackson, 6465, they gave it to the illegal immigrants. I think that that's, obviously a little bit more simple than what happened, but when you look at the nonprofit groups that are dealing with fighting deportation and illegal immigration issues, it is pretty clear it's going to support illegal immigrants before it's going to support the actual victims of these fires. Peggy Passon, 8794, is there a shred of evidence? LOL, let's see it. I would ask you to rewatch that and look through the screenshots we showed. These are actually from the fireaidla.org website. They publicly are sharing exactly which groups this is going to with number amounts. So that's the proof. They're openly saying, here's who we gave the money to. It's not the victims. Lastly, VKing2730, why are NGOs that have nothing to do with victims of the fire getting these funds? It's not what concert goers were giving to. It should be illegal for funds to go to these things that are not direct help to victims of the fires. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's part of the problem here is when you go through the organizations listed, you can't even find anything related to wildfire relief because most of them don't have anything to do with wildfire relief. They have to do with different left-wing priorities that this money is being diverted to, which sets up what we're going to talk about today. We're going to dive back into a few other things that have been unveiled since then. The Center for Nonprofit Management got a large grant from this money raised by well-meaning Americans who wanted to help fire victims. Look at that. Center for Nonprofit Management. That is not to do with fire relief. It's to do with nonprofits and NGOs, helping them have a social impact and strengthening the nonprofit center of Southern California. Again, outrageous that is where money that was intended for victims is going. In their website, they say designated for direct relief and will not be used for administrative purposes, which is interesting because the Center for Nonprofit Management is as administrative a purpose as you're going to find. But let's keep going down to symbols of hope. So, they have a lot of money going to a community garden, a library foundation. These people, these victims, can't even get permits to rebuild their homes. They're going bankrupt living in hotels. Hey, but at least there will be a community garden to make them feel better. One key group that has gotten a lot of attention throughout this process has been highlighted by groups like Circling the News, Spencer Pratt, and others. This group has very close ties to Gavin Newsom and his wife, Jennifer Newsom, who is the honorary chair. So this group, California Volunteers, or Cal Volunteers, has gotten a ton of attention and was a part of this second round of grants that went out. Now, if you look on the website, this screenshot is taken from a web archive in the beginning of June. You'll see that right under California Local Conservation Corps Foundation and Above the Center for Nonprofit Management, which we just highlighted before, you have Cal Volunteers. You see it right there. Now, poof, here's that website today. Between California Local Conservation Corps Foundation and Center for Nonprofit Management, it's gone. Where could it have gone? Now, maybe Gavin Newsom would argue there's nothing to see here. This is a good volunteer group that's doing good work. Why did they make it disappear from the website? And again, even with your best defense, this is still not money going to relief for victims of these wildfires, who again can't get permits, can't rebuild, can't do anything. This is pretty suspicious, and I think we're only going to find out more as media continues to dig into this major scandal. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to this on the road edition of 10 Minute Drill. We will see you again on Thursday. Have a nice day.